Hello and welcome. I hope that you are doing well and thank you so much for joining me here today. I hope that you've had an enjoyable week of reading. I took a few extra days off of work, so I had time to relax, get in some extra reading, and I also caught a cold, and so I had time to rest, relax, and heal up from that as well. So I'm back and we're ready to talk about books. And the book I read was to fulfill the prompt to read a book about a family. And so I read What Feasts at Night, which is a retelling of the Edgar Allan Poe book, The Fall of the House of Usher. Usher being the family in the story. Because I was intrigued by it being a retelling of the fall of the House of Usher. And I was intrigued by the whole concept. I decided to do a little more reading, since I had the time anyway. So, I read What Feasts at Night, What Moves the Dead. Then I wanted to do some comparison also to the original. So, I got an audiobook of Edgar Allan Poe stories. So, it's The Fall of the House of Usher, The Pit and the Pendulum, and other tales of mystery and imagination. And because I wanted to also read, not just listen, I got The Fall of the House of Usher and Other Tales. So we have a lot to talk about today because we're talking about What Moves the Dead, What Feasts at Night, and Edgar Allan Poe. So let's get started. Let's start with What Moves the Dead by Kingfisher. So I've mentioned it's a retelling of the short story The Fall of the House of Usher. And I was intrigued to see how it compared to the original because Edgar Allan Poe writes a certain type of story. They're gothic tales, so they involve feelings of terror, and there are elements of decay. I think this book held up well, and while set in the 1800s, it brought the Poe story into our times. Retired soldier Alex Easton, who we'll refer to here on out as Easton, received a letter from childhood friend Madeline Usher. Madeline is ill. She lives with her twin brother Roderick, and Roderick believes that she is dying. As the story opens, Easton is en route to visit Madeline and Roderick at their home, the Usher house. Upon arrival, Easton finds Madeline pale with nearly translucent skin, feverishly bright eyes, and deathly cold skin. Madeline is not alone in being in a questionable state. Easton notes the overwhelming sense of decay permeating the landscape, from the lake's dark waters to the pale sedges to the decayed trees to the abundance of fungi everywhere. The house itself is falling apart. Accompanying Easton is Angus, who served as Easton's Batman in the armed forces. And Easton learns from Angus that the villagers stay far away from the Usher house. They even refuse to hunt on their lands because the animals act oddly there. They forget to run and they aren't startled by strangers. In fact, the villagers call the hair on their land witch hair. Roderick also has changed in the years since Easton last saw him. Normally fair, Roderick is now unnaturally pale and emaciated. His American friend, James Denton, is staying with the Usher twins, and Denton is the doctor who is caring for Madeline. Her illness includes bouts of becoming immobile, sleepwalking, and speaking in strange voices at night. Also in the area is Miss Potter, and she is an illustrator and aspiring mycologist. Her interest in the local fungi has brought her to the area, and it is from Miss Potter that Easton learns about the local fungi. So before long, Easton realizes that the villagers are right to be wary of the Usher house, And what Easton will need to do is unravel the secrets of the house before it destroys them. In What Feasts at Night, Easton and Angus head to Easton's family's hunting lodge back in Galicia. And Galicia is a fictional country near Moldavia. Upon arrival, they discover that their caretaker, Kodrin, has died and the lodge is in disarray. Locals are whispering about what happened, and it makes it difficult for Easton to hire another caretaker and a cook, which she now needs. No one is willing to live at the lodge. Finally, they find a widow and her grandson, Mrs. Botizatu and Bors, and they agree to fill these jobs. And Bors is quite happy to be the new caretaker, while his grandmother is the new cook, but she is so resentfully. And she directs all that resentment at Easton. What they soon discover is that the villagers believe Kodrin's death was caused by a being from folklore who sits on their victim's chest and steals their breath. Not long after taking up their jobs, Bors becomes ill. He's unable to sleep and he has difficulty breathing. And Easton has developed nightmares about a woman who steals her breath. What Feasts at Night continues the story of Alex Easton and does exactly what you want from a continuing series. It adds to the story, and it adds to the story of the characters in the book. Now for the Edgar Allan Poe portion. And I initially read Edgar Allan Poe just for the ability to compare What Feasts at Night to The Fall of the House of Usher. But then I thought, why not read more of his stories? And I did that in a couple ways. I checked out the audiobook, The Fall of the House of Usher, The Pit and the Pendulum, and Other Tales of Mystery and Imagination. And this has 10 Edgar Allan Poe stories. And because I wanted to read them too, I got The Fall of the House of Usher and Other Tales by Edgar Allan Poe. And I selected this book in particular because Goodreads has it and the audiobook as different editions of the same book. So I thought I was going to have the same 10 stories to read as the stories I was listening to. It didn't quite work out that way. There are some of the same stories, but the print book has many other stories as well. I don't often read audiobooks, but I did enjoy this one. The stories are a good mix of Edgar Allan Poe's stories. The must-reads are there. The Raven, The Telltale Heart, and of course The Fall of the House of Usher. Mixed in are also others that I haven't read as much, like The Black Cat and Lygia. I have to say that the reader does a good job of giving them the right amount of eeriness to make them interesting to listen to. The print book, The Fall of the House of Usher and Other Tales, has some of the same stories, like I said, but it also has quite a few of the Poe adventure type stories and a couple of Dupin mysteries. The Dupin mysteries are some of my favorite Poe stories, and the character of Dupin served as inspiration for a couple of detectives that you might be aware of. Sir Arthur Conan Doyle was inspired by the Dupin stories to create Sherlock Holmes, and Dr. Watson even mentions Dupin in A Study in Scarlet. And Agatha Christie was inspired by the character Dupin to create Hercule Poirot. So one thing I will say about this book is that the print is small. And where there are the portions where there are footnotes, it's even smaller. And there's a section where there's like a page and a half of footnotes. So there's some really tiny print to read. So while I thought I was going to read through this book fairly quickly, it took longer than I thought. I will say that the second half of the book, from like page 200 to page 381, is all one story. It's the narrative of Arthur Gordon Pym, which is one of the stories that I would consider an adventure story, or more correctly, a misadventure story. The main character is a stowaway on a ship, and as you read, you learn of his experiences at sea. And it's by no means my favorite Poe story, but I was surprised to learn of the other stories and the other writers who were inspired to write because of that story. And even more surprised to learn of some of the authors who were inspired by Poe's writing in general, including Dostoevsky, H.P. Lovecraft, and even Stephen King. So I've probably gone on enough for one day, so we will end it here. I hope that you enjoyed this look at What Moves the Dead and What Feasts at Night by T. Kingfisher, and our look at Edgar Allan Poe. I will be back soon, and we will be selecting my March reads. I hope that you will join me then, and until then, I hope that you enjoy all that you do and all that you read. And thank you.